Hello everyone, and welcome to the Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons First Look Livestream pre-show. I hope you all have your coffee or time zone appropriate food and are looking forward to the news we'll be getting today. I'm Rook, also known as Bird of Chess, and I'm a Guild Wars 2 content creator and ArenaNet partner. For the pre-show, I was asked to do something so monumentally foolish that it can only be one of the commander's schemes. To celebrate everything that's brought us to this point and to look ahead to the future of Guild Wars 2 and End of Dragons, I am going to attempt a full summary of the entire Guild Wars 2 story thus far. A huge thank you to Win Potatoes, Kroof, the Guild Wars 2 Wiki contributors, and my partner who's helping me today. Also, a shout out to Philip's mom, and a massive thank you to ArenaNet for having me on. For time's sake, this summary will be as brief as I can make it, and will assume some knowledge of the lore of Guild Wars 2. Wish me luck, and get ready for some high-quality voice acting to kick us off.
Dragons have long been thought to be as much a part of Tyria as the sun, moon, land, and seas. No one, not even the dwarves, know how long they've been here. The Jotun and the Norn both have lingering stories passed down through the generations about the last rise of the dragons. Most scholars give these tales little credit, unfortunately, as so much time has passed. It was over 10,000 years ago that the dragons last returned to their slumber. Excerpt from The Nature of Dragons by Ogden Stonehealer. The Elder Dragons are primordial beings who have throughout history awoken and wrought devastation upon the world of Tyria before falling back into slumber. There are 6 known Elder Dragons: Primordus, the Dragon of Fire and Conflagration; Jormag, the Dragon of Ice and Persuasion; Zaitan, the Dragon of Death and Shadow; Kralkatorrik, the Dragon of Crystal and Fury; Mordramoth, the Dragon of Plant and Mind; and Steve. No, we don't actually know the last one's name, only that it starts with an S, and their domain likely has something to do with water. The story of Guild Wars 2 begins with a very personal story, your personal story. In 1219 AE, the Elder Dragon Zaitan awoke and brought humanity's sunken nation of ore back to the surface. This sent a terrible wave across the lands. The great tsunami drowned thousands. Corsair fleets who took refuge in the Shattered Peninsula were wiped out, and in its place came an undead navy manned by the risen servants of Zaitan. The black-sailed ships blocked sea access to Cantha and Alona, beginning an age of isolation for Tyria. While players were introduced to their respective races, cultures, and concerns in the start of the personal story, Zaitan's lieutenants were seen leading their risen forces deeper into Tyria. Despite the warning signs of increased dragon activity, they were viewed as isolated incidents, and Zaitan a distant threat. Yeah, great job, guys. But where others continued to ignore the signs, 3 multiracial organizations made it their mission to combat the draconic threat. The orders were as follows. The Order of Whispers. Yeah, I don't have any notes on this one. Just sadness and apples? I'm kidding. I'm not really kidding. Their current leader is Riel Darkwater. The Order of Whispers believe the dragons cannot be defeated, but must be returned to sleep by any means. Dermot Pryor is pretty much just like nerds as far as the eye can see. It's also mine. It's my priory. Led by Asura Gix, they study the past to survive the future, in hopes that intellect or some lost piece of knowledge can save the world from the rise of the dragons. Then we have the Vigil. Oh, I do have something for this, so audio warning. Yeah, I feel like that pretty much summarizes it. Does that cover it? This one was founded and led by General Almora Soulkeeper, for whom the song was written. The Vigil believe only a united army of all the races can defeat an Elder Dragon. While the 3 orders aimed to combat the draconic threat, there had been others before them who stood in defiance of the Elder Dragons. After choosing their order, the player character was witness to a meeting between one such group, the former members of Destiny's Edge. Destiny's Edge was a fellowship once composed of 6 heroic individuals: Air, the Norn huntress with the soul of an artist; Snaf, the Asuran genius, and his ambitious assistant Zoja; Ritlock, the ferocious Char warrior in exile; Kaith, a deadly Sylvari with deep secrets; and Logan, who was also there. Oh no, he's the valiant human guardian dealing with divided loyalties. See, he's got depth. They had once been allies of the only dragon that had fought alongside mankind, a prophetess named Glint. Both she and Snaf were killed while confronting Kralkatorrik, which tore the group apart. The player realized they would need to reconnect their bonds if they were going to take up the fight once more.
The Elder Dragon's champion defeated the Lion Guard stationed on Claw Island and readied an invasion on Lion's Arch itself. The character and their mentor in the Order rushed to Claw Island to defend it, but the fortress was lost along with their ally. The Orders realized that although they'd survived, they stood no chance alone. They set aside their differences and formed the Pact to retake Claw Island. The Pact was the greatest alliance Tyria had ever seen, with the Vigil forming the bulk of its army, the scholars and engineers of the Derman Priory working on arcane and technological advancements, and the Order of Whispers handling infiltration and sabotage. The Pact made for a strong fighting force capable of virtually any task. Due to his knowledge of Zhaitan and his good relations with the many races, the Sylvari firstborn Traherne was appointed the Marshal of the Pact and promoted the player character to the position of Pact Commander. Under their joint leadership, the combined forces of the Pact managed to retake Claw Island and looked ahead to the lost Kingdom of Or, where Zhaitan and his Risen awaited. Or was once a kingdom blessed by the human gods themselves, who upon arriving in Tyria built the shining city of Ara over a great source of magic known as the Artesian Waters. Drowned beneath the waves to stop the progress of the Char army in generations past, Zhaitan later dredged it up from the juice box, corrupted the Artesian Waters to be its own magical juice box, and then filled it with undead minions. Fun. To cut Zhaitan off from his juice box, the Pact rushed into the ruins of Or, where it systematically undermined Zhaitan's forces. This allowed Traherne to enact the ritual of purification to cleanse the Artesian Waters. The Pact airship, the Glory of Tyria, crewed by reunited Destiny's Edge and the commander, fought Zhaitan in the skies above Ara. Bombarded by an anti-dragon cannon, the Elder Dragon at last fell to its demise, crashing on the eastern edge of the City of the Gods. With Zhaitan's defeat, Traherne claimed that the impossible had at last become possible. The Pact believed they would need to achieve 4 more impossible feats before the world was truly free. This takes us to Living Season 1. I hope you're all still hanging in there. Here we go. We're going to blast through Living Season 1. There was a ton covered in this season. A lot of it had to just be cut, though. There are great summaries out there. But to start, I'm going to touch on a place called South Sun Cove. This is more of a prelude story, which featured a corrupt island resort, murderous crab monsters known as the Karka, and introduced 2 major characters. Sorry, Inspector Kiel. Kanak, a repentant hireling turned freedom fighter that rebelled against his employer to do what was right, and Casimir Mead, one part of the investigatory duo that make up Delacqua Investigations, with the other half being her business and romantic partner, Marjorie Delacqua. I would love to share the South Sun details with everyone, and in fact, one of our Pool of Memories missions dives into Kanak's story during it, but to be honest, we do not have the time. So the real focus of this season was a little thing known as Scarlet's War. Unnatural storms accompanied a series of mysterious assaults in the Shiver Peaks, causing Norn and Char refugees to flock to their capital cities. While a war council was held in the Black Citadel, a young Norn made his way there to beg for aid in retaking his homestead from the forces responsible for the recent attacks. The youth claimed he was the son of legendary Air Stegalkin. Ritlock Brimstone, a former companion of Air's from Destiny's Edge, called him a dirty liar and sent him to Holbrick, who denied him in the interest of self-preservation, leaving him with no choice but to retake his home himself. We can't confirm nor deny that this may have been the root of this character's deep-seated insecurities and lack of self-confidence, but either way, this is the entrance of the truly beloved character known as Bram Airson. Meanwhile, a beautiful pure char named Rox was sent to reclaim a Devourer hatchery as a test to join Ritlock Brimstone's warband, which she accomplished. Rox had lost her own warband prior to the mission, but an albino baby Devourer named Frostbite took a liking to her at the hatchery and refused to leave her side, giving her a companion she would never lose. Later that year, amidst the merriment of the Queen's Jubilee, a red Sylvari appeared. Revealing that she had been the mastermind of Tyria's recent troubles, this Scarlet Briar hijacked a force of clockwork guardians known as the Watch Knights. As time passed, more information about Scarlet and her history began to surface. Scarlet had once been a curious Sylvari named Ciara. Her ravenous desire for knowledge would eventually lead her to set up a device to peer into the inner mechanisms of the world. Inside the machine, she saw the universe stretched out before her. She pushed further and was confronted by a presence that overwhelmed her. Upon waking, she took the name Scarlet Briar and was plagued by the voice of that presence until any remnant of her sanity was gone. Scarlet's story was tragic, but that didn't lessen the monstrosity of her attacks on Tyria, of which there were many. In one memorable invasion, she summoned an enormous weapon in the Shiver Peaks in the form of a marionette that was ultimately defeated by the commander and their companions. They were joined in this fight by a young Asuran prodigy that admired Scarlet's genius named Taimi. Scarlet's greatest battle was waged in Lion's Arch, and was one that would change the landscape of the city forever. Scarlet won the city by flooding it with toxins, and in the fight to reclaim it, Bram was injured, and Marjorie struck down by their foe, leaving her love, Casimir, to believe she had perished. Though Rox had been tasked to personally take down Scarlet as the final test for admission into Ritlock's warband, she chose to tend to the wounded Bram and Marjorie, allowing Casimir to face her instead. Filled with fury, Casimir was successful in distracting Scarlet Briar long enough for the commander to deliver the killing blow, thus ending Scarlet's war. In the aftermath, a jarring sound echoed throughout Tyria. Taimi and the group surmised that the magical currents known as ley lines were akin to an ocean of magic that Scarlet had thrown a giant rock into, sending ripples out to wake the slumbering dragon. The voice that had plagued Scarlet was that of Mordramoth, whose vicious vines would slowly rouse to ensnare many more Sylvari to come. This takes us to Living Season 2, where everything obviously is really good and only continues to get better, and everybody's happy for all time. Not so much. The memory of Scarlet's terror lingered in central Tyria, and the strange roar that had rung out after her downfall only gave rise to new fears. Outside the perilous Maguma jungle, the Zephyrites' flying sanctum crash landed. For anyone who doesn't know, the Zephyrites are a group mainly composed of Canthan and Elonian humans that inherited the crystal dragon Glint's legacy. The Zephyrites travel the world on a breathtaking flying sanctum built with magic obtained from her corpse. But I guess not anymore since it crashed. The commander rescued the Zephyrites' leader, the Master of Peace, from the ship's saboteur, and clues led them to a settlement known as Prosperity. The local inhabitants of Prosperity remembered a Sylvari matching Scarlet's description that had rented a local room. Vines began surging up from beneath the ground to entangle several settlements in the region, and one such tremor caused a secret passage to be revealed in Scarlet's quarters. Cautiously, they explored the twisting tunnels and came upon a scientific lab built atop a confluence of energy known as a ley line hub. The group decided to split up and follow the path of Mordramoth's vines. Marjorie and Casimir went to meet up with Marjorie's sister Belinda, who was located at Fort Salma, while Rox and Bram ventured to Fort Concordia. Taimi stayed behind at the lab to investigate further. Upon arrival, they found that Mordram forces had infested both locations. Each party did what they could to secure the respective areas, but during the fight that took place in Fort Salma, Marjorie's sister Belinda was killed. Back at the lab, Taimi announced that she'd discovered the machine Scarlet had used to peer into the eternal alchemy, which everybody thought was a real bad idea to use themselves, but well, the commander was pulled into the device and received a vision. They were swimming through an ethereal plane where they encountered an embodiment of the pale tree. This was followed by 6 illuminated orbs revolving around a central, much larger sphere. One of the orbs grew near, then plunged into the center, aligning the rings orbiting it and flooding the surroundings in an eerie green light. The commander moved to organize a summit of all the races at the home and mother of the Sylvari, the Pale Tree, who could hopefully shed light on her role in the vision. Rox reported to Ritlock, who shared that he had a great new plan to take the sword to Hothin that had single-handedly ruined his most important relationship, I might add, and use it in a ritual to break the faux fire curse sustaining the ghost in Ascalon. When the ritual failed, Ritlock threw himself into a portal in the mists that swallowed the sword, proving that he would jump off a cliff if Sahothin told him to. Representatives gathered, and the summit was held. During the meeting, the Mordram attacked. Repelling the attack saved the grove, but the Pale Tree was greatly damaged. Before losing consciousness, the avatar of the tree showed the commander a vision of a golden chamber full of crystals. Marjorie and Casimir traveled to the Derman Priory archives to search the special collections for answers to the commander's vision. Unexpectedly, they found a surly dwarf named Ogden Stonehealer, the author of The Nature of Dragons, and one of the last surviving members of his kind on Tyria's surface. Ogden pointed out a special hourglass that was a relic containing a single grain of sand that doubled as a portal to Glint's lair. Once inside, the group was shown a vision of the Master of Peace retrieving Glint's last unbroken egg, which he saved and carried to the Zephyrites. Unfortunately, by the time they found the Master of Peace beneath the silver wastes, he had sustained a fatal wound inflicted by the Mordram. With his final breaths, he attempted to turn over the egg, but Cantha appeared and stole it away, stating she had no time to explain. Needless to say, I was not pleased with her at this point for stealing away my Dragon Rider dreams. The avatar of the Pale Tree did us a solid, and agreed to help the commander track Cantha down, and gave him a means to experience Cantha's memories. This revealed much. Cantha and the leader of the Nightmare Court, an opposing group of Sylvari that had left the Pale Tree, whose leader's name was Phelan, were once very close. When the second-born Sylvari arrived in the world, Phelan overheard one of their firstborn brethren named Wynn discussing something secretive with the Pale Tree. Determined to learn what they were keeping from the others, she and Cantha pursued Wynn. Upon cornering her, Phelan intended to torture their fellow Sylvari. But while Cantha shared a moment alone with her, Wynn confessed that what she had learned in her pre-life dream. The Sylvari were created to be minions of Mordramoth. She then begged Cantha to kill her and guard her secret. The commander confronted Cantha about the memories they'd experienced. She confirmed that everything they'd seen was true, but she refused to hand over the dragon egg, claiming it was too valuable. During all of this, the Pact had prepared itself following the summit, launching a fleet of airships to retaliate against Mordramoth's forces. Traherne, alongside Air, Logan, and Zoja, ordered fire from the lead ship. Their bombardment was ineffective, and the Vines attacked the fleet, pulling them down to the land below. Survivors climbing from the wreckage were attacked by Mordramoth-controlled Sylvari. In the final moments, Air fired tirelessly upon their foes, while Logan hung on the bow of the ship, holding Zoja in his other hand. But Traherne was nowhere to be seen. The commander and their allies, Heart of Thorns. It just rolls so perfectly into the next bit. The commander and their allies traveled beyond the Silver Wastes, where they witnessed the gravity of the Pact fleet's destruction. Bram spotted an encampment and rushed toward it, anxious to learn about his mother's fate. There they would find Grand Master Larenthir amidst the Pact soldiers, whose spirits were as broken as the ships they'd once manned. Larenthir explained that both Destiny's Edge and Marshal Traherne had survived the crash, but had been taken prisoner and moved further into the jungle. The Pact camp was attacked by waves of Mordrim as dawn approached. In the heat of the battle, Ritlock Brimstone appeared from the mists, blindfolded and wielding the edgelord powers of a revenant. With help from Ritlock's new spidey senses, they eventually found a Mordrim prison cell containing Air Stegelkin and the Grand Duchess Phelan of the Nightmare Court. Phelan declared that she would be free of all masters, and that neither the Pale Tree nor Mordramoth would control her. Phelan's thirst for personal freedom allowed no room for others. The Sylvari stumbled and fell as she fled from Mordramoth's minions, but Air doubled back to help her. Phelan rose, then stabbed her with a thorn and turned to run. Air was too good, too fierce, too strong for this world, and threw the thorn back at her, which felled Phelan before she could escape. Phelan was consumed by Mordramoth's vines, and she deserved it. Bram, who had spent much of his life simultaneously resenting living in his mother's shadow and wishing wholeheartedly to earn her approval, watched as his only chance at a future bond with her died before his eyes. Pushing onward into Maguma despite their terrible loss, the commander and their allies found themselves in a lush forest. Along the way, the party saw a strange glowing figure watching them from a distance. The glowing figure revealed himself to be a member of the Exalted, named Ruka. The Exalted are magical beings who were once Zephyrites. Through a magic ritual, he and his fellow guardians were turned into energy beings tasked with eternally protecting Glint's legacy. The commander and Ruka tracked Cantha through the jungle, finding her sprawled on the ground with Glint's egg. She was facing a macabre monster that possessed Phelan's face, now proclaiming her servitude to Mordramoth. Fleeing with the egg, the commander was infused and wielded part of its energy. Once safe, Ruka invited the commander to take the egg south to the city of Tarir, where they were welcomed by the city's ruler, the Exalted Luminate. Bringing the commander to Tarir's depths, they underwent a series of trials to ensure their capability. Succeeding in these trials, the egg sent a prophetic vision to the commander, which showed Mordramoth using Traherne, Logan, and Zoja as templates for a batch of new, improved Mordrim. With the egg safely under the watch of the Exalted, the commander left Tarir to find a way to destroy Mordramoth. Taimi had an idea as to where they could discover a way to accomplish just that. She led the group to an Asturan city named Rata Novus that had been destroyed by Mordramoth. There, they found a secret laboratory filled with research on the Elder Dragons. The research confirmed each Elder Dragon possessed one or some unique weaknesses. With the Pact forces and their allies launching their final assault on the mouth of Mordramoth, the Pact commander's squad pushed into Mordramoth's sanctum, the Heart of Thorns title drop. They were able to free Logan and Zoja, who had been hooked up to Mordrim pods. While they were at it, they killed the transformed Phelan, sparing us all a whole lot more nightmares. Bram relished that he had taken down his mother's murderer, while Kaith mourned the loss of her one-time friend and love. Making their way deeper into the tangle, they found Traherne fused to vines and barely conscious. Traherne suggested utilizing his link to the dragon to enter the Dream of Dreams, allowing the commander to strike directly at Mordremoth's weakness, his own psyche. Inside the dragon's mind, the allies were confronted with their worst fears. Both of the commander's companions nearly succumbed to the dragon's corrosive thoughts, but were able to break free with help from their allies. In the course of the fight, the elder dragon also tried to break the commander's will, but the commander turned Mordremoth's illusions back on their creator and defeated him. Outside the dragon's psyche, Traherne had one final request for the commander: to slay him and the last remnants of the elder dragon residing within him for good. As Traherne made his sacrifice, a massive amount of Mordremoth's magic exploded across Tyria, infusing Glint's egg with unknown influences before continuing northward. Mordremoth had finally been slain, but it had come with terrible costs, and there were still further consequences to come. Which takes us to Living Season 3. The victories in the war against Mordremoth were balanced by deep losses. Friends of Airstegelkin gathered around her former homestead to memorialize the great hero. Ritlock decided that with Air's death, it was time to form a new guild, Dragon's Watch. Bram didn't attend this because this was, shall we say, his trouble period. Taimi continued her research of dragons at Rodanovus. General Almora Soulkeeper met with the commander and offered to elevate them to Traherne's rank, though the position of marshal would largely involve paperwork from then on. The commander turned her down, effectively resigning from the pact, although this would have been a very different game if they hadn't. At Connacht's urging, the group tracked down a wanted man with a super intense goatee to a coliseum above Bloodstone Fen. Minister Caudicus proclaimed himself to be the new leader of the White Mantle, a group of human outlaws wielding bloodstone magic that believed themselves to be the true rulers of Kryta. An ancient being known as the Mersat appeared, identifying himself as Lazarus. He ousted Caudicus as a heretic and incinerated many of his followers, then vanished. After all this nonsense with Goatee Man, Taimi contacted the group with grave news. Primordis had become active. While scouting signs of this awakening, the commander received another vision from Glint's egg. Returning to Tarir, they were told that the egg was about to hatch, but only they could witness it. Just as our beautiful baby girl emerged, Primordis' destroyer swarmed the chamber and tried to kill the hatchling. The Mersat Lazarus appeared and helped the commander defeat them. When they emerged victorious, Kaith asked what the dragon should be called, and without pause, the commander mysteriously informed her that the dragon was female, and that her name was Aurene. Congratulations, commanders. This is the part of the story where we all became dragon parents. The Exalted Luminate had the commander help impart crucial lessons of kindness, generosity, and combat to the young dragon. Taimi had the brain flash that if mortals struggled to destroy the dragons, then perhaps draconic power itself should be used to fell them. The commander decided to head into the Shiver Peaks to find Bram and hunt one of Jormag's Icebrood to enable Taimi to study its magical draconic corruption. Bram, meanwhile, was in the far Shiver Peaks, where he was seeking out a mystic scroll. Upon the commander's arrival, he took out his frustration and grief on them, but with their assistance, he managed to secure it and enchant his bow with magic. A quick little lore note. The Fang of the Serpent is an important relic to the Norn that's located in the Great Lodge of Holbrick. This tooth once belonged to Jormag and was knocked out by the great hero Asgir Dragonrender. The Norn believe that unless a new hero can damage the Fang, their people will have no hope of defeating Jormag. In 100 years, no Norn has managed to do so. Except returning to Holbrick, Bram fired an arrow at Jormag's tooth, cracking it to the roars and cheers of the onlookers. It was the sign that the time to strike back at the dragons had arrived. With perfect timing as usual, Taimi called to confirm that with the information they'd gathered, she'd created a dragon-slaying machine. But dragons were not the only threat our heroes would face. Due to the aforementioned Goatee Man shenanigans, doubt was cast upon the entity Lazarus. Marjorie, who had been shadowing Lazarus due to her own suspicions, alerted the group that he was raising an army in the Fire Islands. Taimi set up a trap to expose the Mersat's secrets. Lazarus arrived at the lab, intending to seize the dragon-killing machine for himself, but was caught in the trap. His illusion faded to reveal that he was, in fact, and hold on to ya butts, Balthazar, the human god of fire and war. He took the device and boogied on out. The group chased him to Draconis Mons, there's a lot of words, everybody, where they confronted Balthazar over the slumbering body of Primordus. Balthazar absorbed the dragon's energy, sending both it and its twin Jormag back into their deep sleep. He then disappeared. With both dragons having returned to a dormant state, Tyria would enjoy a momentary peace. However, Balthazar's fate remained unknown, along with his plans to make use of the draconic energies he had absorbed. Which takes us to Path of Fire. The god of war sought to claim the power of Kralkatorrik for himself. He pushed forward into the Crystal Desert and left a fiery trail of destruction in his wake. Let's return to the 6 human gods real quick. While the gods historically played an active role in leading humanity to flourish, roughly 200 years ago they decided that they would leave Tyria behind for good, which was totally cool, and the humans were fine with it and definitely didn't have a crisis of faith ever since. Conquered by an undead lich named Palawa Ignatius Joko. Yes, everyone, I know, I don't even have to look at the chat, and I'm sure I know what's going to be happening. Alona had long been a human nation cut off from their central Tyrian brethren. For the first time in generations, representatives from mainland Tyria would cross into Alona and pursue Balthazar to re-establish contact with the isolated region. The commander sought to aid the population, and in doing so learned that a dragon had been active in the area, named Vlast. Vlast was revealed to be the first scion of Glint and brother to Aurene. The commander tracked Balthazar and Vlast until they were finally able to confront the god, who had captured and restrained the dragon. During the clash, Balthazar referred to Ritlock as a friend, saying that he alone would be spared. Balthazar moved to strike down the commander, but Vlast managed to break free and sacrificed himself to block the blow. Vlast's body turned to crystal and exploded. The members of Dragon's Watch awoke to find Balthazar had vanished, but the question of why he'd called Ritlock friendo remained. So it turns out, Ritlock had met a super sketchy old man chained up in the mists while he was searching for his one true love, Sahothin, and let the guy reignite the sword, then freed him without a second thought. He now knew that the old man had been Balthazar, and Sahothin, the god's own blade. He promised the commander he would make up for his actions. The commander found echoes of Vlast's memories in the gleaming fragments of his shattered body. Vlast's recollections spoke about a hidden weapon, his struggles to follow his mother's legacy, his fears if Balthazar managed to kill Kralkatorrik, and his hopes that his sister would find her path a better one than his. With no other leads to this hidden weapon, the group sought long-lost secrets from long-lost souls. They traveled into the mists where they found the Sanctum of the Gods. Cormyr was the only remaining deity to be found, though she too would soon depart their world. She told them that the gods had left Tyria to avoid a cataclysmic battle with the Elder Dragons. Balthazar insisted avoiding battle was cowardice, and threatened the other gods. The rest of the 6 stripped Balthazar of his power and chained him in the mists, for which he swore he would get vengeance. Once free of the mists, the commander also went on to unearth more about the true purpose of Glint's legacy, to preserve Tyria's magical balance by replacing elder dragons. They also discovered why Balthazar had hunted Vlast. Kralkatorrik's own blood was its weakness, the same blood that flowed through his descendants, Glint, Vlast, and Aurene. Intending to share this information, the commander moved to reconvene with their allies when Balthazar ambushed them. After a brief battle, the commander was overpowered, their life hanging in the balance. Just when all hope seemed lost, Aurene barreled down from the skies to try and defend them. But while her spirit fought valiantly, Balthazar was able to overpower her with his sheer strength. The last thing the commander saw was Aurene in chains, before Balthazar struck them a lethal blow. And then you died. And that was the end of Guild Wars 2. Oh, wait. Oh, then the commander awoke, without their memories, and in the domain of the lost. They were able to reclaim their mind and encountered Palawa Joko in the process. Joko had made a deal with Balthazar, but instead of fulfilling his end of the bargain, Balthazar just chose to imprison the Lich King in the domain of the lost. That seems fine. The commander didn't choose to free the conqueror, but they did choose to free themselves by completing tasks for Grenth's servant, who returned them to the world of the living. Awakening, the commander's still body reanimated with new life. Alongside Dragon's Watch and the war marshals in the region, the commander assembled an army prepared to face down Balthazar's Forged. Wave after wave of Balthazar's forces crashed into the defenders. Still, the commander held strong. Balthazar bound Aurene to one of his war beasts, using her to lure Kralkatorrik, and launched an attack when he arrived. Leaping to her aid, as Aurene had tried to do for them, the commander killed the war beast and freed the young dragon. Together, Aurene and the commander killed Balthazar, ensuring his flame would never raise another land. The death of the god caused a massive surge of energy, which was absorbed by Kralkatorrik and his granddaughter Aurene. Aurene then flew off, with Kralkatorrik following, sparing the surviving forces from his wrath. Which takes us to Living Season 4. A brandstorm erupted over the city of Amnoon. Following its devastation, Aurene, now an adolescent dragon, landed before the commander. She gave the assembled allies a vision of Faranur, located in Istan and currently filled with a huge army of Awakened. Faranur had once belonged to the primeval kings before a horrific illness known as the Scarab Plague had ravaged it. The disease caused victims to develop scarabs under their skin, which is the worst. Palawa Ignatius Joko was good at one thing, and one thing in particular: not staying dead. Having managed to escape from the underworld, he'd put a bounty on the commander's head and decided to kidnap Taimi to exact his revenge. Arriving in Faranur, Dragon's Watch continued through the city until they reached an Asuran Inquest gate hub. Pushing through the forces at the portal, they found and freed Taimi. Before the Awakened fell back, they informed the commander that Palawa Joko had declared war on them and their allies. Taimi led the commander to rescue and recruit a former friend of hers from the College of Synergetics who had joined the Inquest, Blish, and his brother, Gorik. Meanwhile, Joko and his undead forces broke into the labs the brothers worked in and stole all the research the Inquest had done on none other than the Scarab Plague itself. Joko began to strategically unleash the plague. In response, the commander rallied forces to besiege Joko's moon fortress. In the end, the commander faced Joko alone. After a long battle full of insults, taunts, and jeers, Joko finally left, leaving only silence behind him. But you remember what I said Joko's number one skill was? Yeah, so Joko rose again and trapped both the commander and Bram. He proceeded to monologue, but at the climax of his speech, Aurene surprised Joko and then ate him. After being devoured, not even Joko had a final sassy retort. While Joko's threat subsided, Kralkatorrik's rose. His fearsome champions, massive crystalline dragons known as Shatterers, began to tear rifts between the physical world and the mists. The newly freed factions of Alona and the commander's forces sought out a long-abandoned Sunspear sanctuary called Sun's Refuge. They'd only just secured the space when a rift spilled branded monsters and the spirits of the undead on their doorstep. Air, Bram's mother, and Snaff, the former member of Destiny's Edge who had died to Kralkatorrik, joined the fray and fought off the branded. When the dust had settled, they imparted a message from Glint's spirit to Aurene. It was time for her to kill Kralkatorrik and take his place as an elder dragon. However, Aurene received multiple prophetic visions of the possible outcome of this conflict. No matter the ally, no matter the location, all ended the same way, with her own death. Aurene fled, worrying the allied forces. Still, they could only continue their plan to lure Kralkatorrik into the mist in the hope of planting a tracker on him. When Kralkatorrik arrived, Blish sacrificed his golem body to power the tracker due to an unfortunate turn of events, and the commander was forced to leave him behind. In the mournful aftermath, Cantha arrived and took both Aurene and the commander once more into Glint's lair. There she would bequeath these words.
With you, champion, I share my true legacy and Kralkatorrik's greatest secret. He foresaw the possibility of a world at peace, a world without strife between dragons and mortals, a world without him.
At the keep, nearly every allied force gathered to prepare for the assault on Kralkatorrik, from Alonian allies to the members of the Pact. Aurene returned to confront the fears she had once run from. As her mother had faced her own death, so too would she. Cantha offered herself to Aurene to be willingly branded, and the commander assumed a new title, that of Dragon Champion. Aurene spoke her first words to the gathered forces, but they would also be some of her last. Aurene's visions of the battle turned out to be accurate, and while fighting beside the commander, she was killed by Kralkatorrik. But you remember that thing about Joko? Yeah, well, you are what you eat. Gathered to mourn the loss of their only hope, the commander, Cantha, and their closest companions pulled the dragon's impaled body free from Kralkatorrik's killing spike. Without the jagged crystal, her body repaired itself, and Aurene rose from the dead, just as her champion had. The commander mounted Aurene and chased after Kralkatorrik. Aurene managed to blast off one of his wings and opened a portal back to Tyria, which Kralkatorrik raced through. He crashed into the ocean southeast of Or, creating new islands with his body and pieces of the mists. Aurene flew the commander into Kralkatorrik's mouth, straight to his heart. Inside, Kralkatorrik was warring with a manifestation of his own torment. There they clashed at last, and Kralkatorrik's vision of a world without him came to pass. With Kralkatorrik defeated, Aurene ascended to become an elder dragon and rose into the heavens. Chasing away the shadows of a war-torn world, the light of a new day had dawned. For time's sake, we are going to do a bit of an abbreviated run through the Icebrood Saga so that I can take you all to Cantha. So, thank you for listening so far, and here we go. The Char had been fighting a war on 3 fronts for much of recent history. One, against the vengeful human ghosts of Ascalon. Another, against the branded caused by Kralkatorrik's corrupted dragon brand. And the last amongst themselves, as they struggled to decide whether or not they could choose to set aside a history of war for a future of peace. In an unusual sign of camaraderie, the Char invited the commander to the Blood Legion homelands for an all-legions rally commemorating the defeat of Kralkatorrik. Tribune Cresia Stoneglow welcomed the party to the valley. Blood Legion Imperator Bangar Runebringer spoke, and a ceremonial battle ensued, led by Ryland Steelcatcher, who was revealed to be Ritlock and Cresia's son. Why did you pick Sahothin over her, Ritlock? Aurene brought an end to the battle when it got out of hand, but the sight of Kralkatorrik's progeny at a celebration for his defeat drew a mixed reaction from the attending Char. While the celebrations continued, a sense of unease pervaded the events. This unease led Bangar, Ryland, and several sympathetic warbands of Char to head into the Shiver Peaks with Bram's stolen bow. They were planning to subjugate Jormag, so the Char too could possess a weapon as powerful as Aurene. In the next bit, unfortunately, while they searched and sought and received a summons from General Almora, at the keep they were summoned to, they found all of the occupants dead. Unnatural whispers plagued Dragon's Watch while they searched, worming their way into the party's thoughts. By the time they found General Almora, she was long dead, buried under a slew of rubble. Alas, it would later be discovered that Almora had freed herself and attempted to stop Bangar. At his command, she had died by Ryland's hand. While Bangar continued to his march to uncover Jormag, the commander discovered the source of the whispers was one of Jormag's champions named Drakkar. While they sought the beast, Bram found a shrine dedicated to the spirit wolf, who tasked him with purifying the fallen shrines of Ox, Eagle, and Wolverine to gain their allegiance. He would go on to do this, and the party would confront and then defeat Drakkar. To the far north of Drizzlewood, it was discovered that Jormag was within the Frost Citadel, an ancient keep long corrupted by the dragon's ice. While a new unified force known as the United Legions gathered together in the Char to bring together the remnants of their people, pushing back Ryland, who offered peace but was rebuked by some of the actions of the other members. The commander and their companions realized that a final assault to the Frost Citadel would be necessary. Deep within the fortress, they encountered Bangar and battled him, but he was saved by Jormag, who awoke and made him their glorified mouthpiece, choosing Ryland instead to become their champion, before leaving Bangar behind. Primordus and Jormag were a package deal. Twin forces that opposed one another and revealed their weaknesses in turn. When Jormag began to stir, Primordus did as well. Each fought to claim more magic than the other to overpower them. This threat, after the Char and the peoples of the world had been united, became the new main priority, although Ryland and his forces still rallied behind Jormag. A plan was devised. Elder dragons fed from ley lines, so they would look for a nexus and use it as a lure. Then, with Aurene's crystalline refraction, the dragon's magic could be redirected from their champions and used against one another. If they were starving, injured, and cut off from their magic supply, they'd be forced to clash. But only Jormag had a champion. Well, it was lucky then that, recalling Owl's final words, Bram had offered himself as Primordus' new champion. It would take all of his will and the power of the spirits of the wild to retain even a shred of himself to complete the mission. The dragons collided in a huge spectacle of light and magic, neutralizing one another and leveling anything in range. When the light faded, their energy was all that remained, coursing up and away towards some unknown point. Ryland was unable to relinquish his fury of the champion's power he'd claimed, and Ritlock was forced to kill his own son. Bram, however, let it go for the first time in his life, and survived. So, looking ahead to Cantha, these are the events that have happened so far in Guild Wars 2. But what about the future? Of the 3 continents we currently know of, Cantha is the only one we haven't seen in Guild Wars 2. Separated from Tyria and Dallona by an ocean, it's been 262 years since we ventured to Cantha in Guild Wars 1. Cantha was united in 1127 AE under the strong fist of Emperor Usoku, who then embarked on a campaign to drive out non-human races from the continent. Under his tyranny, Cantha became increasingly isolationist. The continent has 4 known regions: Xingje Island, Kaineng City, the Echovald Forest, and the Jade Sea. In Guild Wars 1, Kunavang, a salt spray dragon, played a pivotal role in helping save Cantha from Shiro Tagachi, a reborn assassin. While Cantha was once known for its flourishing cities and largely human populations, many members of the bird-like race known as the Tengu also once called the region home. With our future ahead of us, I leave you with Glint's final words.
A better world is waiting to be born.
If we're lucky, perhaps the Age of the Dragon, the current age in the Canthan calendar, will begin and end with peace. Thank you all so much for listening. We had to abbreviate a little bit at the end just to get through. Again, I am Bird of Chess, aka Rook, an ArenaNet partner, and you can find me on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, at Bird of Chess. Let's see what the future of Guild Wars 2 has in store, and I hope you enjoy your first look at End of Dragons. Thank you all so much. We did it. Oh my gosh. Thank you.